Hello there, and welcome to the quest. This is Pondering the Orb. I'm your host, the wandering fantasy author Jay Reckward, and we're looking for riffs, synths, and fantasy books. So subscribe, and let's get started. Red-haired, fiery in his absolute certainty, and with blue-eyed murder towards his enemies, Karl Edward Wagner's KANE has captivated audiences since he was first introduced in 1975 by this famous North Carolina author. And with Bloodstone, Wagner places his greatest character in possession of a small greenstone ring streaked with blood and won on a raid. It leads KANE to an object of unimaginable power, and with power comes madness. Reading from 1975's Bloodstone, this is Karl Edward Wagner's KANE. Bloodstone by Karl Edward Wagner. For miles uncounted the forest stood supreme. Giant trees reached their branches heavenward, fighting for sunlight and fresh air. Beneath their dense foliage existed another world than that of the open sky above. Twilight of the forest floor. There the cool gloom was broken only by scattered rays of sunlight that crept through the ceiling above, to melt upon the thick bed of leaf mold and pine needles which covered the floor. No undergrowth flourished, except in spots where an arboreal giant had fallen and torn a gap in the forest roof, through which yellow sunlight streamed. Then for a short time a cerement of underbrush might thrive on the rich humus beside the decaying trunk, until the branches above refilled the gulf and strangled the life-giving rays. But the floor was far from a lifeless desert. A myriad of animal life, great and small, scrambled through the forest. Insects rustled through the carpet and up the trunks of the great trees. Serpents glided along the ground searching for rodents, whose dens were among the tangled roots. Several species of small furry animals picked their way through caves and grooves in the moss-hung debris of fallen branches and cast-off leaves of many seasons. High above, birds chattered gregariously, and somewhere a squirrel cursed in rage over some unseen affront. In the distance a crow croaked nervously and was still. The doe heard its half-hearted call of warning and froze in the shadows, her fawn pressed against her flanks, shivering on extraordinary legs. Her wide eyes swiveled in alarm, and her taut ears tensed for sounds of danger. Cautiously she drew a breath through sensitive nostrils, seeking a scent of wolf or bear or other predator. For a minute she paused, searching for some evidence of danger. None appeared, and visions of meadow clover beckoned. She stepped from the shadow of the trees once again, her fawn close behind. Packed loam of the path recorded her pointed hooves but a few steps when a hissing arrow tore through her ribs. Gasping in agony, the doe staggered, then plunged along the path in blind flight. The fawn paused only a second before instinctive terror supplanted bewilderment, and on his stilt-like legs he pounded after his mother. A chorus of crows caught the scent of blood, of fear, and raised a raucous protest. The hunter jumped from his concealment alongside the trail, another arrow nocked and ready. Bounding into the game trail, his patient eyes recognized the stream of blood, and he grinned jubilantly. Lung, at least. Maybe heart, too, by the blood. Run while you can, bitch. You won't go far. He drew a long knife and followed confidently the glistening trail. Her hoof prints quickly left the path, but marks of the doe's passage were obvious by the crimson splotches splashed upon the forest floor. As the hunter surmised, she had not run more than a few hundred yards before death pulled her down. She lay in a sudden depression in the ground, a cavity ripped from the floor a few years earlier, when an enormous tree had been uprooted. Her breath rattled now through red-foamed nostrils, and her eyes seemed already glazed. He clambered into the depression gingerly and cut her throat. Wiping the knife across her flank, the hunter cast about for the fawn. No sign of him. Something would get him by morning, probably, so at least he would not starve. He felt some slight remorse over killing a doe with a fawn, but the day had been long, and his family in Bremen came first. Besides, he was paid to bring in deer for the market, not to observe forest ideals. He sat against the bank with a tired but satisfied grunt, wiped his face on a dirty sleeve, and looked about him. A minute's rest, then gut her, rig up a drag, and pull the carcass into Bremen, and that would about finish it for this afternoon. The bowl inside which the huntsman rested was several yards across, for the tree that had wrenched loose was an ancient one of immense size. Bare soil still scarred the depression, although material had begun to slide down from the edges. Something glittered from the bottom of the hole. A lance of sunlight shone down above to spear something bright, embedded in the humus. Some object that cast back a silver reflection to the hunter's eyes. Mildly intrigued, he rose to get a closer look. The object that lay there in the dirt made him grunt in puzzlement and squat down to make an astonished examination. A ring lay embedded in the dirt. Around it the loam was streaked with white, crumbling material that seemed to be rotted bone, and reddish splotches which might represent rusted iron intermingled. Brushing away the loose surface, he discerned a few greenish lumps, recognized only as corroded brass or copper. The body of some ancient warrior, possibly, although how long it had molded there beneath the forest defied his imagination. Long enough for bones and accoutrements to crumble away, and the tree that had overgrown the grave was centuries old. With unsteady hand the hunter pulled the ring free of its bed of tainted clay, and brushed loose the tenacious fragments that encased it. He spat and polished it against his leather trouser leg, then raised it to his eyes for appraisal. The metal was silvery in appearance, but seemed far harder. Silver should have tarnished black with antiquity. It seemed to be set with a tremendous capuchin-cut bloodstone, rich, deep green stone with red veins traced throughout its depths. But it was a superb example of that gem, he judged, holding it to a ray of light. For the colors were somewhat more intense, and there appeared to be a quality of translucency to the stone that made it distinct from the normally opaque gem. The stone was huge, abnormally large for a ring, and it seemed to fuse cunningly into its setting. Carefully he scraped free the last few stubborn flakes of bone-streaked clay from inside of the ring, and held it before his finger. Whoever had worn this ring lost it centuries past must have been a giant, for its girth was several sizes too great for any normal finger to hold. Uneasily the hunter recalled legends told by the Slanari of giants and demons who had stalked the forest even before they had settled here. And there were tales among his people regarding the savage Rulati, who supposedly never strayed far beyond the slimy shelter of their swamp. But the hunter had a solid, practical mind, saying a prayer to Almim for protection, and to the spirit of the rotted skeleton for pardon. He dropped the ring into his pouch. Mechanically he began to gut his kill, all the while speculating pleasantly as to the price his find might bring him at the jeweler's market in Bremen. Love you, old man. Returning to the premiere episode of this season, we're reading from John Hartness's The Seven, Unforgiven. His love letter to the epic and high fantasy of his youth, this book is perfect for fans of Raymond Feist and Nicholas Eames. Reading from his 2024 Falstaff Books release, this is John G. Hartness with The Seven, Unforgiven. The Seven, Unforgiven, by John G. Hartness. Chapter 1. Not much of a town, the young man thought as he climbed down off his horse and stretched his back. Certainly not the kind of place I'd expect to find him. But maybe that's the point. He took in the meager buildings as he walked down what passed for a main thoroughfare. To his right was a smithy with a huge greenskin half-orc beating a horseshoe in the shape. The peals of his hammer rang out in rhythm that the man found himself unconsciously matching with his steps. He gave a wry half-smile and slowed his pace. There was no reason to hurry. Next to the smithy was a general store with a wide porch. Two old men sat across a weathered oaken barrel from each other, not nearly as intent on the game of kings and pawns as they might want to seem. The younger of the two, a whippersnapper of barely 70 years, cut a wrinkled eye at the man as he passed. He gave it no serious mind. People liked to stare at anything different, and this did not seem like a town where men often wore steel in the street. A pair of women leaned out the windows of the boarding house across from the store. one a red-headed human with freckles scattered across her impressive bosom, the other a lissom elvish woman, carrying the air of ennui and sadness that always enveloped the Fae folk when they were away from their trees, either by their own doing, or by circumstances beyond their control. The elf caught his eye, her hand swaying down to her thigh as she sat perched on the window-sill, a dress of gossamer green silk flowing in the slight breeze. The man noted the slight bulge of a blade strapped to her thigh. This willowy forest dweller was not without her defenses, it seemed. He allowed himself another slight smile as he focused his attention on his destination. The town's only inn and tavern sat at one end of the street, more a wide dirt path beaten down between the buildings than anything constructed with intent. A wide, two-story building, 6 sturdy posts held up a shallow porch covering the front door. A low wall sat atop the porch, just about the perfect height for a crossbowman to kneel behind and take some cover, while still seeing the approach of anyone coming from town. Large windows blanketed the front of the building, but anyone closely would no doubt see the large shutters hinged to the top of each window. The traveler gave a slight nod as he saw this. No doubt there was a release mechanism inside that would drop down each shutter simultaneously. He may have left the life, but it certainly hasn't left him. His heavy boots thumped on the steps leading to the porch, and the man paused. That wasn't right. His footsteps were too loud, with too much echo. An amused huff escaped him. He kept the spaces under the steps so hollow it would be harder to sneak up on him. Anyone running onto this platform would announce their presence. The doors were unlocked, of course, but they pulled out instead of in, another nod to defense. He pulled the door open and stepped through, blinking his eyes against the sudden dimness. He took in the gaming tables, the small stage in the corner by the fire where bards and traveling minstrels would play for their supper in a warm spot to lay their head. The steps leading to the guest rooms were enclosed by a narrow corridor instead of the usual open staircase. But this proprietor wouldn't be renting out girls, so there was no need to display their wares to the drunken clientele, and narrow hallways were much better for defenders and much, much more difficult for attackers. He strode across the room to the bar, feeling every eye upon him as his boots clomped across the worn wooded floor. The man pulled out his stood and said, "Ale." He didn't look up. It wasn't time yet. He wanted to make sure his quarry was close enough before he revealed himself. A meaty brown hand with brutally scarred knuckles pushed a tanker across to him. A little foam ran down the side of the battered pewter mug, and the nutty scent of home-brewed ale wafted up to his nose. Someone has developed a new skill in the past few decades, he mused. "First one's on the house for newcomers, but I'll need to see the color of your money before I'll pour a second," the bartender said. His voice was a low, rumbling baritone that seemed to come down from around the bowels of the earth. The man said nothing, just reaching into a purse hanging from his belt, and withdrew a small gold disc. He placed it on the bar and slowly drew back his hand, revealing the coin. The bartender kept a tight rein on his reaction, but not tight enough to hide the sharp intake of breath as he recognized the token for what it was. Not a coin of any realm, but a token, a symbol of a very special organization that the world thought long dead. Only 7 coins like this had ever been made, and thanks to a very particular piece of magic in the smelting process, only 7 could ever be made. They were only supposed to be in possession of 7 very specific people. The young man sitting at the bar sipping ale was not one of those people, and the bartender knew that fact only too well. "I'm afraid that won't spend here, stranger," the burly bartender said, drawing closer and leaning over to wipe up drops of foam from the bar's immaculate surface. "How did you come by that coin? And how did you come to be in my tavern?" The bartender's voice was low, too soft to be overheard by any of the other customers, but there was no mistaking the cold determination behind his words. If he didn't like the man's answer, the threat of extreme and immediate violence was very real. The man looked up at him, finally meeting the bartender's gaze. This time the thick-shouldered man didn't even try to hide his shock. He took a step back, his eyes widening in shock, maybe fear. Who are you? I know those eyes. I know them like I know myself. But they don't belong in a child's face. Who are you, boy? Tell me who you are and what you're doing here, or I swear by all the gods I'll split your skull open right here and root around in your brains for an answer myself. My name is Cobble. My mother was Altera. She gave this coin to me, saying I would know when it was time to use it. It's time, Leshru of the Broken Blade. It's time for the Seven to ride again. Few bands have been consistent at leaving a mark on their audience like Parasite Inc., a band from the German scene in Aalen. With 3 stellar albums under their belt, including 2022's Cyan Night Dreams, they have constantly pressed on the edge of their sound. A mix of Children of Bodom meets the anthemic flair of 80s Scorpions, with slick riffs and an outrun tempo that believe everyone banging their heads. We're playing Sunset Overdrive, taken from 2018's Dead and Alive. All the way from Germany, this is Parasite Inc. Our next selection of synthwave comes to us from San Jose, California, and an indie musician who has consistently appeared in some of the best synthwave playlists over the last 3 years. Walla False is a great sorcerer of the synth, able to create delicate but full soundscapes that transcend as they ease. A mighty producer as well, Pondering the Orb is always on the lookout for new music from this wonder. Taken from 2022's collection of hits, Faraway, this is Petrichor by Walla False. Thank you for joining me. Remember to check out all the books and music below in the description and subscribe. Safe journeys.